these are interesting headlines. I don't know if you see them just in the mainstream media. I doubt it. But these are so prevalent and so widespread. I don't know why they're not in the mainstream media. It's not like Americans don't know what's going on. Most are catching on to a lot of fallout from the COVID vaccines. And here's just some headlines to chew on. We're not going to read the articles today. Spike protein syndrome is sweeping America as deadly disorders are springing up out of nowhere post-COVID vaccination. That's quite a headline. And there's just a lot of complications that are manifesting over time, where millions of people have not only took 2 vaccines but 2 boosters. And I'm not trying to be anti-vax. We're not that, but we're pro-information, and we certainly want to make good decisions with all the cards on the table. And that's been missing in these last year and a half or so since these vaccines were rolled out. And look, we need to know what's going on. And there's so much fallout. You can't even hide it. I mean, people know it. People know there are different ones that have gotten hurt by it. But it's been a growing phenomena. And unfortunately, the application of these shots has not, prevented infection. President Biden recently, he's been vaxxed twice, and he's had 2 boosters, and he's still got COVID. So it doesn't prevent it, does it? Well, then the argument is, and perhaps there's an element of truth to it, I don't want to say there's not, but that it might diminish some of the, long-term effects or whatever. I certainly hope that that's the case for millions of Americans, but the amount of risk involved is disproportionate to the benefits, and it's just, this reality is playing out. Maybe you don't hear that from other people. Look, every conservative talking head that I know anything about, they're all over this issue, okay, and have been for months, even since it rolled out. So if you pay any attention to people that are connected, and pay attention to doctors like Peter McCullough, Dr. Robert Malone, these are not insignificant gentlemen. They are world-renowned physicians, and they're all over this issue. And Dr. Peter McCullough, for some time, he has said we need to pull these vaccinations because there's way too much risk and we're having too many adverse effects. Well, here's another headline. Truth shall prevail. People are now pushing back against COVID-19 vaccines. That's very real. Here's an alarming thing. We've touched on this in a few stories. Have you noticed? I don't know. Maybe you have. I just was looking at headlines again over the weekend and seen 2 more relatively young people, one of them an athlete, just died suddenly. Just died. Athlete deaths are 1,700% higher than expected since COVID vaccine rollout. That's just mind-boggling. And we need, Neil, with a headline like that, you would think the mainstream media, government, CDC, you name it, everybody would be saying, what in the world is going on when we have 1,700% higher than expected deaths among athletes? These are the best conditioned people in the world, and they've been dying at an alarming rate. Folks, there's always a risk in participation in any sport, and sometimes athletes do, unfortunately, die for different reasons. But since the vaccines have been rolled out, there's a 1,700% spike. Well, Neil, I just don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure this out. And of course, there's plenty that are doing studies to verify this is alarming. Why aren't we all over this?
Yeah, it does seem odd, doesn't it, that if you have something like that, they don't even talk about it. I wouldn't have heard that. I haven't heard that anywhere else. I haven't been looking for it, but my wife and I were looking at something the other day, and there was a child's, I don't know if it's like a toy thing, but like 3 children died in the course of using this thing, and so they recalled the whole thing, and I just thought, but that makes the headlines. It's in the news.
Right.
Or a peanut butter recall. We've all heard about that.
Right. There you go.
But we don't even hear about the other because it just seems like you can only hear one side of it.
Now, did you folks catch that illustration? We can all relate to that. Why aren't we responding to this, which is just thousands, hundreds of thousands of people affected and many dying? It's sad. Well, maybe it's connected to some of this right here. Another headline: COVID vaccine news. Big tech continue to censor, but people continue to wake up. Google, YouTube, Twitter, all guilty of recent censorship. They continue that drumbeat. And it's like, you know, if you try to just talk about it in a civil manner and say, hey, we got problems here, whack, take you off. They've been doing this for going on 18 months or better. I imagine that's a reason, that's part of the reason the thing's never been pulled, because there hasn't been, what can you say, folks? Perhaps through the concerted effort to censor, it's kept the American people calmed down, you know, because there ought to be an outrage over this.
Yeah, and it is true. I mean, we've heard it from our own White House administration that they've said, well, we're working with, you know, Facebook and YouTube and all of these guys in order to see what things need to be, I forget the terminology they use, but basically the things they need to censor and the things that they don't, because they've got to keep a certain message instead of just don't get me wrong, there's misinformation about there about literally everything, but as Americans we should be able to decipher what's what, you know?
Well, the Word of God gives us some clear direction in regard to making good decisions. It says in the multitude of counselors there's safety. Mm-hmm. So in regard to maybe somebody saying something that wasn't quite accurate or perhaps was misleading, that can be squashed, you know, squelched out if you have a multitude of counselors. Mm-hmm. And what you need to do as believers and Christians or the general population is you have a family doctor. That's one counselor. That's not a multitude. You need to read other doctors. You don't need to take my word, Neil's word. We're pastors. We're not trained in medicine per se, but we can read. And we certainly know people like Dr. Peter McCullough, who is a world-renowned cardiologist, etc. And there's many thousands like him. You can listen to their advice. And then when you have a multitude of counsel, you can come to a very good decision. But just the wholesale pushing of something, irregardless of side effects and, you know, dangers and the hurt that it's causing, we're just going to push this thing. That's ridiculous. It's just, it's mind-boggling that this is happening in our country.
Yeah, and we haven't, I don't think, quite seen it this way, at least not in my lifetime, to where there's just nothing ill can, period, be said of it on either side of it. You know, it wouldn't matter if you had facts or data or not. It's just, we're just not going to talk about that.
Well, to encourage your heart a bit, because it's difficult at times to have peace about how you should go forward. Pray over your health decisions, your medical decisions, get plenty of counsel, and do some research. And don't lean on me per se or Neil, but lean on doctors who are down in the trenches helping people and who have seen the effects. And there's plenty of information out there, and we can certainly help get you connected to that if you're interested. But talk to your doctors and seek the Lord and get plenty of counsel. That should be the case when we're making just about any decision, right? Mm-hmm.